And I want to welcome you. I'm sure we'll have others join us as we go along, but I want to welcome you and repeat what I always say at the beginning, that Critical Connections is our effort to enhance and encourage critical writing in ceramics. And our guest today is Linda Sormin. I'm so glad you could join us, Linda. And because I sent out the link to your website, I am not going to go into a big introduction. So take it away, Linda. And I have it set up so you can screen share.
All right, I will go ahead and screen share. Thank you so much for inviting me to join your conversation today. I will just start here and let's see. Okay, that's in my way. All right. Is that clear for everyone?
Yes.
Yeah. Great. So I would like to, just say that it's such an exciting time to be thinking about language, and writing for me has always been something that I've had this love-stress relationship with. I was an English major, and so having that early understanding that you could really be moved by words and stories and narrative, and also, bring that kind of poetic understanding of things into a nonverbal space is something that's always been intention for me. So as a sculptor, I work with raw material, and the language and the fluency and the dialects that are developed through working with clay over 20 years now, and go into a space that is beyond language for me, things that I can't describe, or things that are unspeakable in some way, or difficult to wrap words around. That's the place that I make from. At the same time, having this sense of lightness, and, bringing paper, because that's the lightest kind of, I was using paper clay for a long time, and then bringing actual paper and cutting into the watercolor paintings, as in this piece here, Banua Ginjang. And Banua Ginjang is the word in Batak Indonesian that refers to the celestial, or things that are of the celestial realm. So things like spirits and things like air and all this lightness. I want to bring that into my work. My ancestors in Indonesia are from North Sumatra, and the mythology from that area of Indonesia is something that really captivates me and holds a lot of meaning for me as I dig down, using clay, but also talking with family and learning more about my origins. So this is some of the, I'm just throwing in some excerpts from writing. Elaine asked me to speak about writers and what I think of how they might be understanding my work or able to express the work. And this piece of writing was just in ceramic art and perception. And Natalie's take on understanding my pieces, I was really, touched by some of her wrapping language around things that I hadn't been able to talk about. So she is speaking about the fragment, which I have been really interested in. I understand the world through fragments, severed from my family's history and clarity around the past by colonialism in Indonesia. I understand, like so many people from the diasporic experience, understand my history and my family through fragments. And so I use fragments of clay, little bits of people's shards, things that break in my own practice, test tiles, things that might be lost in some way. They're reclaimed and put into the objects. And here, Natalie's talking about the fragment, a seemingly passive object, is a powerful marker for the violent displacement of people and culture as a result of colonialism. So when I'm feeling this, I'm not thinking those things as I'm making, as so many of us understand, many of us make and write. And so for me, it's very different spaces. And so taking that kind of red earthenware clay and knowing what that means and feels to me, this kind of earthy material, and then this kind of white stoneware, a much more dense material. If that was language, for me, they have sound, they have resonance, they have nuance. And then the way that the glaze is either translucent or cloaks something or hides things or attaches things. Those things also relate to grammar and the way that sentences and the way that things are spoken, but also kind of seen on a page as well. And so that's all stuff that kind of tumbles through my mind as I'm kind of reflecting on writing and making. Let's just there. So here is an excerpt from Paul Greenhalgh's writing on my work. I recently, just last year, put together just a small catalog of my kind of just selected works from between 2011 and 2022. And I haven't, actually launched it here in North America yet, but I want to kind of share 2 pieces of writing that have been written on the work, my recent work, and also just images of the work that I've done over the last 10, 11 years. And one of the things I really like about Paul Greenhalgh's take on when he's talking about my work is he made an early connection between when I'm writing and I'm writing on bits of paper and I cut bits of paper. And often when I'm, kind of stuck, I'll print out something that I've typed out and then use literally scissors and tape and kind of collage things together, because that's how I used to do it as an English major, as a high school student even. So I think that early way of dealing with, printed text on paper has also influenced the way that I work in the studio, kind of changing the order of things, maybe turning something upside down or pulling text to an edge when it used to be in the middle. It's a very physical kind of spatial way of understanding sculptural form, but also language. And so I'll just point out here, one of the connections that Paul has made is just in the middle here, where he's talking about concrete synapses fire out in color, describing incidents and moments that have come and gone, leaving behind only fragments of evidence. So, I'm always kind of working with these forms that are pinched lattice work structures that for me really embody architecture, but also kind of the structures of thinking and of the way we connect with humans and ways of surviving in the world, whether they're nets or networks. But I really like how he connected my work and my process to, synapses. It's always fun and exciting when I have a chance to install in a space that kind of challenges my understanding of my own work. And so MASMOCA 2 years ago was an opportunity to do that in a room that was taller than I'd ever, worked in before. And so having this chance to work in the celestial, that kind of Banua Ginjang space up above, but also the underworld, which in Batak Indonesian architecture is inhabited by mythological dragons, and animals live under the house. And so I went through the floor of this gallery in MASMOCA, of the High Gallery, and had videos and ceramics also kind of below the floor. So this kind of under belly of art practice and understanding an installation, looking up at it, but also knowing that something exists below you and something that's out of view, something that's invisible. I think that's a really exciting space for me. And when Susan Cross was writing about this piece, she kind of concluded with, my relationship with Thai architecture, Wat Arun, which is Temple of the Dawn. And all of these bits of shards of ceramic are from shipwrecks and, lost at sea, all of the, the waste and the loss that is kind of just held in that glazed, colorful ceramic is then put onto all of these temple spires, and the Temple of the Dawn is covered. It's just, ornament is an understatement. It's just, kind of really packed with all of this amazing detail. And so Susan Cross is talking about a mashup of materials, conjuring a complex mix of cultures and experiences shaped by migration and globalization. So that understanding of, moving through the world, collecting bits of things, and then kind of assembling them in these layers of things that you can see through, but also knowing that you can't see everything, because there's some things that are beyond our vision and are kind of in a place that goes beyond what we can see. And that's where I think language and sound and things that are evoked by something that goes beyond the visible is something that's exciting to me as well. the structure of clay that so many of us are familiar with. This latticework structure early on was something that inspired the way that I would build. So, building these structures in a kiln, just a barrel kiln, you can see just kind of pinching and seeing what fits into this space, what can take up room or travel through this process of touching and pinching. And I think that's a tension that I really like in this kind of open lattice work form, and I'm drawn to that over and over, is the earthiness of it and the very clear understanding that this is material stuff. This is earthy. It's something that can be squeezed. And, I think that maybe my least favorite writing is when people just get stuck on that squishiness. Although it's very, it's very key to it. But beyond that, I think the tension that I want to pull from that and kind of tease out is the opportunity to understand these also as something ephemeral. So even though something's earthy and it's solidly here, it's definitely a material that is rich and present, and it has odor. All of these things are very earthy. There's also this sense that in this very delicate, precarious construction, it's also at risk, and it could be lost very easily. So there's a ephemerality about it too. So that's the kind of the tension of living with our bodies and knowing that I'm really here, but also more and more discovering my own fragility and my physical and even social precarity and vulnerability in the world. And this sense of being on the edge or the verge of collapse is something that comes up in the writing on my work that interests a lot of writers and me as well. So this piece on the right is on a rocking bottom. So I'm building the ceramics on a curved bottom sometimes, so that all of these forms that are already kind of vulnerable and precarious are even more unstable because the whole form can rock. So I really like that sense of things being on the verge of movement or change. This piece was really inspired by a stream behind my house in Alfred. And so I, for the first time, scanned using a 3D scanning app, a really cheap little glitchy app, just to scan the stream. And the stream is impossible, of course, to capture with precision. So that blue form at the top is a 3D printed porcelain rendering of the stream behind my house. And then the shards right in the middle, you can see blue and white shards of a ship. So the sense of movement on an ocean. This was made at EKWC, the European Ceramic Work Center, in 2021 in the summer. And yeah, I wanted that sense of water and watery movement to be part of this. And again, this is from Natalie's recent essay on the work. And she speaks again of, movement and migration, the transitory trek of peoples across the globe, whether forcibly or through choice or adaptation. I'm always really grateful when the context is given by a writer. And I think that's something that, when I'm in it, in the making, I feel all those things. I experience things in my life and in my history of, moving with my family from Thailand when I was 5 and understanding what it means to be an immigrant in North America. But, when I'm in the making, of course, it's a very abstract space that I'm working with. So it's, I'm grateful for moments where someone recognizes something I'm doing and can put it in a wider context, but also be very present with the actual experience of what it means to be in the work as well. Rift is an early installation of mine at the Middlesbrough Institute of Modern Art. And this was a chance for me to see what people would do in a space as they walked around a pool of water that I installed inside a plexiglass enclosure. And there were 6 mini openings during this exhibition where the curator, James Beaton, I invited him to walk into certain parts of the installation and interact with it in some way. So you can see there's some stepping stones there. So he would walk in through there. And then this pipe in the back had a fan, a very strong fan. So when he walked in there, I wanted his hair to blow back, kind of this, human in the environment kind of simulation. And I also wanted him to literally open the pieces. So enclosing some of my earthenware forms within a porcelain skin, fired porcelain, and inviting him to open the piece and literally do that during the opening, but also 5 other times during the 3-month exhibition. So here he was practicing with mallet and a kind of a wooden chisel that I found in the garbage dump. I use a lot of scavenging to figure out ways to reflect a community's junk back to them, things that people hold and then lose. Garbage heaps are often a really great way to tell stories around what people maybe would rather not spend time with. This is the view through a plexiglass tube that came out of the wall at the side of the gallery. I've asked James Beaton, the curator, to crawl through with a hard hat and safety goggles and to break open the porcelain forms.
Linda, could the audience hear the noise of his pounding?
Yes, for sure.
Okay.
That gives you kind of an idea. Yes, they could definitely hear that. That was recorded from the audience's point of view. And so the job of a curator is to protect work and to conserve work and to, in many ways, sometimes I think that act of trying to protect and to preserve can also kill the work. And I was kind of playing with that and kind of flipped it and invited him to literally open the work. And through that, the work becomes alive, but it's also in many ways lost. So that kind of power dynamic between curator and artist, between a gallery space and what people are looking for when they come into an art experience were questions I was asking. What are we willing to put at risk? What am I willing to put at risk? And what might be discovered on the verge of things going bad or broken or lost? And so things would fall down through that hole in the floor and crash across the concrete. This is 20,000 times magnification of clay, Leda clay in particular. This is the clay that is found in Ottawa, the capital of Canada, which is I'm a Canadian citizen. And this is thixotropic clay. And I just really love just seeing these particles of clay, kind of, putting that up against the diagram. This all really inspires me, the things that we can't see, but we know are there. We always think about the platelets and the particles of clay and what we do with them in our making process. But to see that and to also know that thixotropic clay is by nature unstable. And so anytime there's an earthquake or something moves the ground in Ottawa, buildings can list. And Canada and Norway are two countries that have this thixotropic clay, this Leda clay, that often causes landslides because of its unstable nature. So the idea of clay being something that is volatile, but also underlining the history of Canada, built on the erasure of Indigenous peoples and the erasure of cultures. So that kind of instability in my nation's capital was a reason I used that clay in an installation at the Carleton University Art Gallery in QAG. This is Neverhole, also an exhibition in Canada, an installation at the Gardner Museum. You can see here examples of the kitsch objects that I invite into the work. I'll find things that have somehow been damaged in some way. Often it's missing a foot or there's a crack, and find ways to tell stories and to reclaim a life and maybe a charge that was existing between the previous owner of the clay and also the new stories that I want to overlay as I'm in the space with the work. This is looking down at the Massimoka floor. So if you looked way down in there, there'd be a little video, and also just hand building raw clays. Often raw clay in my work will be woven and mixed in with the fired bits, especially in a situation like that. Murray White from the Boston Globe saw that installation, and I was really excited by his last lines here, where he describes it a bit: the tangle of jagged sheet metal, the video screens, iron pipe, vibrant clay. the chaotic amalgam of material and form, so ragged and violent, it looks like the aftermath of a natural disaster. And I think he really got it. You asked me in your initial invitation, do you feel like writers get it? And when he saw that, it's saying, tear it down, start again, the rules have changed, I felt, that really resonated with my initial intentions of that museum installation. And also a lot of my work is going into museum structures and poking at what we think is stable or should be held up as important, and questioning the way that we canonize certain things and exclude other voices. And yeah, I'm interested in this idea of tear it down, start again. Janet Koplos also, wrote about this exhibition in Art in America, and I'm really, grateful for the way that writers can, like Janet does here, can see the work, but then can describe it visually, but also hold a physicality in the way that the work is written about. So, the gargantuan agglomeration of tangled clay tubes, a section of spiral staircase, really taking us through the architecture of the work. Like, these things don't usually exist together. And then a dragon head used in Chinese festival dances, detritus arcing through the air within and around a zigzag metal framework. When I'm working in installation, I'm trying to get things to, have this poetic trajectory, to follow a line, not necessarily that makes sense, but something that you can feel yourself moving through a poetic physical experience, if that's possible. And here, I think in that line, Janet really, does that for me in saying, arcing through the air within and around, a zigzag metal framework. So exuberant motion, like a whip lashing fire hose. So also bringing in things, there's no fire hose literally in the piece, but I'm getting that sense of things that are on the verge of, flinging out. So an installation, when I make it, is very still, except for the moving images in this case. And maybe some of the pieces that are suspended are swaying, but that sense of, apocalypse or disorder that is so central to the way that I see the world was captured so succinctly by Janet in this writing. So I'm really grateful for that. Two of my friends' children looking into the hole, so you get some scale. But when people's bodies are in the space, that's also, something that goes beyond just words for me. And I get really excited by people's physical interactions. I like, being up on a balcony or fly on a wall, watching what happens when someone moves into the space, what they go to from place to place. It's almost like a story that you can choose, your different points of entry, and then the way you move through it. I just recently watched my first TV drama where you could do that. It gives you a choice on which way to go, and you click. It was kind of cheesy, but I kind of, it resonated, with me in giving people the choice of where to move within a narrative. Just like those books that, as a kid, it was like choose your own adventure kind of thing. Nagapadoha is the name of a mythological dragon, the sea dragon in Batak mythology. And the origin myths are something that I'm really drawn to. In the past couple of years, I've spent, 2 summers in the Netherlands. The Netherlands, as the colonizing country of Indonesia, which is the country of my ancestors, have an extreme amount of Indonesian art objects in their museums. And so I've been able to spend time looking at the kind of shamanistic books, but also representations of dragons and other mythological figures, and then also be building these as well. This was made at the Cal State Long Beach ceramic residency, and Chris and Tony there were amazing hosts in inviting my experimentation in the middle of their kiln room space. And so this was made just very differently than I've made a lot of my work. This is all just kind of hand-rolled slabs and extrusions. And that kind of physicality of a solid entity, but something that's also unraveling and has this abstraction to it, overfired. So it has a sense of the clay and the glaze being pushed beyond its natural behavior or easy behavior. And that's also in this piece, leluhur, which is Batak Indonesian word for ancestor. For the first time, I put paper into my sculptures in 2020. And I was like, whoa, 2019, 2020. And that for me was the permanent with the impermanent. And that kind of was another kind of physical surprise, and also a metaphorical kind of exploration of what lasts and what can't possibly last, because, that image of a bird up on the right here is just on tracing paper. So it's super thin on tracing paper. And the imagery that I was just kind of intuiting and feeling that, oh, I kind of see the rooster as an ancestor figure. So I had this kind of found rooster down at the bottom. And then I have a blue and white Chinese figurine, a young woman figure. So it represents me and my ancestor kind of, facing off. I didn't realize that that imagery is also very present in pustahas, which are divination books. And these divination books were used to contain, of course, spells to tell the future, but also to protect and to heal in the villages in North Sumatra. So this is my first visit to a Batak Toba village. And the way that that has influenced my work in the last couple of years has been really significant. So I'm really, excited about the chance to put more of this into language. I'm actually going to be leaving for a creative writing workshop on Sunday. I'm flying to Banff for my first writing residency. So I'm really nervous because it's not, something that I am at ease in that situation. That sense of discomfort is something that is also part of my practice. And I am excited to see what that opens up in the next little while, next couple of weeks. So I think we're at the halfway mark in a few minutes. If anyone wants to have questions, or I can talk more about the installations that I'm showing you, what would you prefer?
I think, wow, and people can talk and ask questions whenever. You have more images to show, Linda?
Yeah, I do.
Linda, how much time do you spend on post firing? You're doing a lot of adding on.
Mm-hmm.
So in situ, do you take these pieces and then bring pieces with you and then start adding on? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Sure, it's so different for each piece and each installation. So if I go back a few to this piece, there's nothing added on. It's all clay and glaze, and that's what's holding that together. So I really like that sense of the adhesive or the muscle and tendons of the work all being clay material that's gone through firing and it's been over fired. There's a density to that that's exciting to me. And also just getting in close, I don't know if I can zoom in, no, but the celadon glaze and what happens when it's over like incised scales, it just, for me, that kind of relationship to historic ceramics and to, celadon dragons from millennia past, I just really love how that resonates with something that I just make with nothing added onto it. When I'm doing something like this, it could be just a few minutes of adding the paper, the cut paper, the watercolor paintings, but the watercolor paintings actually take maybe more time to make than the ceramic components. So I'm, painting and cutting, and I've worked with assistants to cut as well because it's very labor intensive, and then bring them to the piece. And sometimes that can just take 10 minutes, and then that's all that's added onto there. In this work, all the component parts, the found objects that I brought with me, and also the ceramic forms that I brought with me that were pre-fired, were combined with things that I spent maybe 3 days in Colorado, just around the Denver Art Museum, at the mining school, at the mining museum, and also just anything that people in the local community wanted to bring to the museum to incorporate this kind of story that I'm kind of collaborating with people. So you can see there's a whole bunch of boxes here, and that all of those boxes were taken from a classroom in the mine, and that's what they use to drop onto student miners to teach them how to do rescues in a mine where there's no light. So they'll turn off the lights in the mine, and they have to drag out 200-pound dummies, and then they drop those boxes on them. So I love this idea of like the urgency of teaching, but also this urgency in a mining classroom. It takes on a whole other kind of intensity. So this would take a lot longer. That installation, I think, was 2 weeks, if I remember correctly. And then this installation took 3 months to make the ceramic objects. And to be going to the garbage dumps and to be collecting things from people's renovations. So 3 months of making alongside collecting found objects that resonate in some way with the story that I see coming into shape. And in this case, I usually work with kitschy objects. I showed you a lot of things that are trash, cultural kitsch. And in this case, these are national treasures. So in Norway, these Chinese objects were taken from the Forbidden City and then donated to the museum director by General Munta, who lived for 50 years in China. So there's a whole like kind of cultural and social history. I think he was courting the daughter of one of the museum trustees or the director, I don't know. And, you know, so that's how these came into the West Norway Museum of Decorative Arts in Bergen. And so I wanted people to come closer to them because I noticed people were just kind of walking by, and, you know, I wanted to create forms that would somehow invite an intimacy and a material closeness and proximity to these objects, because to me, I saw them as stranded in a museum, and also taken, you know, whether they were wanting to be there or not. I wanted the sense that they could have a way to go home. So I built this red boat out of wood and painted it red so that they could, you know, leave if they wanted to and come and go at will. There's a whole bunch of stories that kind of, you know, weave in and out of this particular installation that I can go into a bit, but I wrote about that in an essay called Love Notes to Buddhas, Are You Land or Water? And that, you know, kind of weaves together things that happen on different time frames as well. So we can go into that later if anyone's interested in, but lots of things happen, including cat burglars coming in earlier that year, and in the area just above the Buddhas, coming in and stealing things that they could fit into their packs. They broke a wall open from the parking garage, and
wow.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch
we
of
have
museums.
We have one question in the chat from Joe
Oh.
Shea, who's with the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And apparently she sent this to you directly, but she's curious if you ever thought of opening the exhibition, completing, breaking, changing the work yourself versus the curator. Have you done that? Or will you?
I would love to do that. I think that's a great idea. I have always been interested in inviting other voices. So I tend to, you know, set it up and then invite someone to, you know, be part of that breaking open. So in Neverhole, that yellow image that I did in Toronto, it was a smaller installation, but it's the gardeners in a town where I have a lot of friends and family. So I invited my mother to come in to break open pieces. So that's on video. And I have friends and colleagues. I've also been in situations where I've invited curators and they don't want to do it. They're like, no, can't do it. But actually, you know what? I have broken one. Let's see if the video's here. Let's just speed through some of these. And I did do one right before, not the whole installation, but parts of it. Let's see if I can skip forward to that. If anyone sees anything they want me to talk about, I can come back. Oh, here we go.
Love it.
Wow.
Linda, I don't know if you, Linda, can you hear me? It's Lydia Thompson, and Elaine, thank you for bringing her. This has been great. I've been looking at your work for some time now. And I also am very, I think it's an infatuation I have right now with things that are broken and passed down. And I did a talk. Elaine invited me to do a talk as well. And there is something kind of satisfying and memorable about objects that survive the test of time. Like, they've survived. I mean, the piece is much older than when you actually get it. Like when we're talking about these tchotchkes and different things and things that are passed down through family. I mean, they've been in existence for a long time, you know, and I am definitely have a real relationship with these objects. And, you know, so I feel that we're related to each other in some spiritual ceramic way. So I really appreciate kind of what you're doing and treating ceramics, understanding the value of ceramics, but then also understanding its fragility too. So my question to you is, do the pieces survive with just the glaze, or are you having to go back and use other types of adhesives?
These are all the ones in front of you and the ones I showed earlier. It is all glaze and clay. So unless I want there to be some kind of ephemerality in the paper or another layer of something, or maybe at the last minute I just needed an object to be in there and there's no time for firing. But no, clay and glaze is so strong. I am so kind of thrilled by, these pieces look like they could take flight or something like that, or kind of squirm away, but they're all only clay and glaze. So I really, that's one of my favorite ways to be in dialogue with the thousands of years of things that last, but then I also want to push it to the verge of not wanting to hold on too tightly to things, being okay with, well, not okay, but maybe accepting change. And sometimes change involves fracture or reorganization of particles, the sense of a fragment not being dead, but it actually comes to life in a new way for me, having that extracted piece. So I will, in large pieces like this, sometimes reinforce if I feel like the way I built it was just so experimental and so freeing that in the process, holding everything together isn't the most important thing. And I often, like, this is made in 2 different parts. And so during the firing, it kind of like stuck together a bit. And I'm like, oh, that kind of looks interesting together. What if I actually glued it together? But I think the strongest way to make things is truly to rely on the structural integrity. But then I want to push our comfort zone around, why we want to hold on to every little bit of it. And we want it to stay the same way all the time. So the fact that these pieces will shed I use that a lot when I'm talking with a curator who's considering working with me. I'll talk about the potential of these to move and change and shed. And I need them to be comfortable with that, because I am also, doing a lot of experimental acrobatics when I'm putting them up in the air or turning them upside down. And then of course, if someone is wanting to take something home and to collect it, then that's, something that we can talk about as well. And different pieces have different ways of interacting with that dialogue. I also wanted the digital aspects of my work to have that sense of ephemerality and glitchiness as well. So a lot of you can see here, that's my hand inside a clay hand that I made even bigger than my human hand. And so the idea of the hand going through an app, but then being processed so many times that it also starts to fall apart. So here you can see images falling apart or fracturing in ways that the clay doesn't really do it in that way. The clay is pretty solid and strong, especially, the way I'm building it with hollow tubes. All of those are very structurally sound. It's a very, has a lot of tensile strength. But when I'm playing with video and 3D scanning, and also in this case, VR, I'm taking objects that I make, scanning them, putting them into VR. And during kind of the deep pandemic, I was playing a lot in VR because it kind of brought me together with people that I couldn't be with in person, but we could be together in virtual reality. And so having those kinds of spaces captured with the ceramics and then put into the installation was really exciting for me. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I appreciate your question. Thank you.
Linda, I see so many dichotomies in your work, and you started out with the mention of the word celestial, I think maybe from one of the articles, and yet they seem to defy gravity, I think, and then there's this sense of containment. I first saw your small work in the Scripps exhibition a couple of years ago. I think it was just last year, maybe. And I wanted to just pull up a chair and dive into the inside. I found this desire for intimacy with the interior of the small work, and then the contrasts that you put into it, with the extreme fragility to the point of wondering how you possibly could ship a piece, and then to the strength of the other elements in it. I'm not really asking a question. I'm just kind of giving you a little stream of consciousness here that I find your work fascinating. And then it's interesting to me that you were building some of this right in the kiln. Is that a common practice for you, so that you don't have to move them when they're in their most fragile state?
Yes, definitely. So most of these pieces were built in a kiln, in a car kiln. That's my favorite way of building is something on wheels so that I can make things in precarious ways. And here you can see this is like just kind of the wild clay being harvested from streams around in Alfred. So I want that sense of rawness to still be there. It's like the rawness in wild clay is something that you can smell the stream, you can smell all the things that have, you know, rotted and become part of this clay body. And then to feel that rawness in the clay object, I really wanted that to be not overly scripted and not too refined. And so here you can see, you know, this kind of shows that rawness. It's like the raw clay body. This is you know, it's upturned. I'm showing the underbelly, but this was definitely something that is, you know, best for me made in a kiln, and then I can biscuit, turn it around, and then keep building it. Or you know, if there's no kiln available that's a car kiln, then I'll, you know, make do with other kinds of building. So like this piece, this large piece in Massimoka was not built in a car kiln. It was built on its, you saw it kind of, you know, in its green state, its unfired state, and then it was transported to the car kiln, and then it was pushed in, because in a group setting you can't have that much time to, you know, build on the car kiln bed. But ideally something like that would be made on there so that there's no stress on it when you're trying to lift a piece like that and then set it back down. This one, however, was lifted and put it. This was not. Was this built? I think it was just built on a big kiln shelf. So that's another option, you know, for me. So I don't have to, you know, it's hard to lift something when it's curved and it's unfired and it's trying to hold all of these delicate structures up. Somdun is the Thai word for balance, and it has two kinds of balance. It can be the kind of balance that, you know, it goes from, you know, side to side, that kind of balance, but also the act of trying to find balance in life. And so I like that kind of tension between stability and instability.
Well, and there's kind of a sense of chaos, as you mentioned, but also this unique formalism that you are so aware of, or that comes through in the work.
Well, I'm interested in what you said about, you know, you were really drawn to the interiors and you wanted to spend time with the interiors. What do you think it was about the interior?
I think it was almost like the dollhouse effect, where I probably at the time envisioned myself to be about an inch tall and crawling through the interior of the pieces and experiencing them from different viewpoints, which you might be able to do with your larger work, where you can get in and under and all around. But I'd found that there were so many entry points into the work visually that I was wishing I could eat one of Alice's little candies.
I think that's really true. I think that the installations are a way to get inside the complexity and the density and the ungroundedness of the sculptures. And then in my paintings, I'm trying to do that as well. You know, I turn them over and over. Like during the pandemic, I ordered a 25-foot roll of paper, and this is when I had no access to the clay or the kilns. And I rolled that 25-foot roll of paper, you know, from one room down a couple steps into the next room, and just painted one side. And it took, you know, months, and then, you know, flipped it over, painted the other side, but still lacking that intricacy and that complexity and that layeredness. You know, started cutting, and in this way, you know, had this sense of another kind of space, so kind of, you know, being inside not just the work or a space, but also maybe a psyche, an idea of like being inside, a way of imagining through things. This is Boru Sibaso Payet, which is the installation at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. This is the most recent installation I did and came down this summer. And so on one wall, there's one of the video projections, and on all three walls, there's a video projection, and each of them has close-ups of the ceramics in the work. So it's that sense of giving kind of center stage to what you're talking about, that interiority and that kind of glowing microcosm or ecosystem within each piece, but then here blown up so that that's even bigger than, really playing with scale and having a sense of disorientation maybe, and letting us feel what is it like to be really inside those pieces. And that was just done with my old SLR camera. I put it on a little cart with wheels, and I just rolled it slowly. It was really kind of silly feeling, but I wanted that sense of just like panning through, and then you could see like in the video, like it hits something else in the studio, like hits a tripod or something, and it kind of bounces back. So there's this analog sense too. So it's not just a digital experience. It looks like it might be in VR or something like that, but it's not. It's just like panning in a very analog kind of way.
Linda, I want to go, can you go back that last picture? I want to ask you something. I just saw, it emblazoned on my mind the Sarah C show that was
Yes.
at Guggenheim.
Yes.
And that installation on the top floor was just extraordinary too, with all its moving parts and intricacies that one was drawn into the depth of the work.
Absolutely.
And from a logistic point of view, I'm wondering how you handle the way I was interested in trying to find out how, you know, the kind of notes that the artist would leave for a curator or for the future generations when this work gets archived. So tell us a little bit about your record keeping, your documentation, when a piece like this gets installed, and then you're going to reinstall it, let's say, in a retrospective 5 years from now or whatever.
Right.
That what are the notes that you're leaving for curators to reenact and reposition the piece? And coupled on that, how do collectors, I mean, what do they get in terms of placing the piece in what, I'm not talking about little pieces, but large scale installations like that, like this?
That's a great multi-layered question, Judy. So when I am starting the piece, I am making models for museums, not because I want to, but because they really want to know what is happening and how is this all going to be, you know, installed. And so I work in this case with really thin dowels and just glued things together to make the metal armatures. And then a lot of it is improvisation. So a lot of this is not planned where exactly each piece will go on, but to kind of give everyone a sense of what's happening, including my installation team and also the museum staff and the teams there. They really want to know what's happening, the engineering. We have to talk about weights of things and what the walls can hold. I'll do something like mock up a corner of my studio, because usually my studio is not big enough to mimic the whole thing. So for the Denver Art Museum, I created a 20-degree angled wall and started mounting the actual kinds of metal armatures, and then put ceramics actually on there. So it's very, again, very to scale and very analog. And then there's a lot of, you know, studio visiting around that, usually through Zoom or photographs or video, so that people can see exactly how that is holding together. But I want the thing to look impossible. So there's a lot of risk taking, a lot of improvisation on the spot for the installations as well. I don't guarantee that this will necessarily be the same as it is now, but through the process of making, we did extensive video recording of each stage, so you can kind of see the layers coming together. I think of Stream, there's actually a time-lapse video on YouTube showing, you know, each day, what changed each day. And for this, it's just very informal. I go in, but I'm curious about how they come into being as well, because I think that that's a wonderful idea, you know, to be able to install this later the way it was in a space of these dimensions would be wonderful. But it hasn't been my goal necessarily to create a step-by-step so that we can replay it. So I haven't made that. Yeah.
Was obviously important to you that in this final placement that the elements that are hanging and the juxtaposition of these, at what I can see in this image, the space between them, that's all very critical in
Yes.
being able to walk around and peer in, et cetera, et cetera. So I just wonder whether you leave detailed documentation in the sense that this should be, you know, 18 feet apart or 18 inches apart. And I think that really impacts, because your eye, you're very seasoned, and the artist eye is incredibly important in the way this gets constructed. And then reconstructed as time goes on. I bet you have a big amount of storage warehouse that you're paying lots of money on, right?
I do now. And those two shows came down this year. And so, yes, these pieces are in storage.
But I just
And
want to
they're-
make sure that you are indeed very, concerned about if it was reinstalled, that the same concepts of their spatial relationships remain constant.
That would be amazing. And I've kept, the scale model is used and reused. You can see all of the marks of, it's been at the metal shop where the welding got done for the metal parts, and all the measurements are there. So it starts with a very precise to scale model. And then what do I do when I'm in the space? I'm like, with Mass Mocha, I was like, I noticed that the artist before me, which I couldn't have planned when I was planning the installation, they had put their installation on the same wall on the same side as I had planned. And I don't want to do that to the architecture. I don't want the architecture to experience something redundant. So I turned my drawing and my plan upside down, and we installed it in an inverted way. And so it kind of gave relief, I feel, to this space. Like, I feel like there's a dialogue with architecture that feels very, very real to me. And when I'm here in a more intimate space at the MFA Boston, I was there, but pretty much every move is really calibrated. So, it can take an hour to place a piece, left, right, up, down. And then there's also the sound component and the video component as well, and honing in on where do we want that sound to come from, what part of the story, because I started recording my father's voice and my mother's and my nephew's and my own voice. Talking, sometimes mine is scripted, but other things are just sounds. And so there's 6 different points within the installation that you can hear the sounds coming from. So all of that isn't as well documented as you are advising, so I will take that. I will take that advice and really and think about that. Thank you.
The legacy, darling, the legacy that we're looking for as well.
Totally. Are there any other questions, or I can tell you more about the work as I keep showing images?
Yes, 2 questions. One, are you still teaching? And if you are, how in the world do you have time to do such complicated pieces?
I don't know. I am on sabbatical. I just starting my sabbatical this month, and it's the first sabbatical, my first full year sabbatical in 20 years. I've never had a full year sabbatical before.
Wow.
So I have been working full time, and I'm pretty exhausted from, feeling excited and invited to make work that kind of stretches me beyond what I can imagine at the time. And I mean, I am enlivened by that process, but I'm also really grateful for this year where I don't have any shows booked until the fall of next year. So I have a year to really do what I started in the early summer, which was just start to experiment. So I've been experimenting with, because there's so much drawing that's happening, my new experimentations have drawing in the clay on surfaces. Here you see it on paper. This is extracted from that 25-foot roll of paper, and they're painted on both sides. And so these are all images that are in the small book that I self-published. And yeah, I want this chance to just kind of be alone with the work. And, it was a very, very high productive 20 years, especially the last 2-3 years. So I really want this time to kind of gather new information and take new risks. And I've been doing that this summer. That's why if you're on Instagram, I haven't posted very much, because I really want to keep some of this kind of steeping for a little longer, so that we're not always pushed just by the deadline of something coming up.
The second question, it has to do with cultural information. And since you're using, I mean, we have this long history of Western art telling Western stories, and we assume that everybody knows the references in those cases. But now, when people from many cultures are showing, in New York and in the museums everywhere, there's cross-cultural information. And when you give, I mean, obviously, if you have a show and there's a catalog essay, that provides the context and the explanations for all these things. But what do you do in terms of titles or in terms of specific imagery that you don't know whether your audience is going to be aware of what it is. What do you do about that?
What do I do about it? This is a good question, because this image right here is merantau, and merantau is an Indonesian concept of moving from place to place. It's the custom of when a man turns 18, he must move from his village and find his own village, usually a place with its own tree in the center of the village, and then start his own family and his own community around this tree. And so that idea of, nomadic existence, moving from place to place, I title it that, and then I do write about it. I haven't kind of enforced it on anyone. Like, there's not long explanations on my website or anything like that. And that's something that I'm thinking about as I, approach this, writing workshop and starting to get more intentional with language. I do feel that probably the artist's voice in this case would help a lot to help to specify meaning and to create connections that are not only abstract and poetic, but also ground us in some kind of lived understanding and something in context. Does that answer the question, Janet, for now?
Are there comments or questions for Linda? This has been fascinating.
Overwhelming is the word.
It is.
I do have a question for Linda, and from one person of color to the other, how have you been able to navigate the categorization of being other or minority, or do you feel that you've had pretty good opportunities to exhibit your work more broadly and widely?
That's a great question. And it's something that's so deeply felt by so many people of color working in the arts, but also just living in the world. At this time when so much work is being recognized that needs to be done, there's a lot of burden on us to represent and to help, fix and to help solve problems. And I think that taking this on top of all of the things we do as creative contributors to culture, and personal traumas, familial traumas, historic traumas, all of these things kind of, layer themselves in ways that I think I can only find a way to express it most clearly in my work at this point. It's another reason I really want to get more into the mode of honing language, written and spoken for me. But there's a piece I kind of showed, but we were talking about something else as the pictures went by. It's called Reshaping Rage. And it's an image that is, for me, it's holding this this sense that all the things that we cannot say, all the things that we feel burdened by or broken by, can be held in these really tense and brittle ceramic forms. So my experience has been one that I feel very fortunate to have had great mentors and people who've encouraged me, and I have received opportunities to show my work. Definitely. There's also been times that I have felt that the narrowness with which the work is understood, or the lack of support and recognition, maybe earlier in our times in a community, those things are still, I think, in my body. Like, I feel the kinds of frustrations and the kinds of weight and the kinds of tensions in my body, and the only way I know how to deal with it is to put it in the work. And so I think a lot of the ways that the work is fractured and at points of discomfort, and it's a troubled state, and it's a state that things are being lost. I think that feeling broken and fragmented and frayed, that you can't hold all these things together, the sense that these forms can't hold things together, that's also how I feel a lot of the time. Like there's so much, and it's so intense, and there's just there's a helplessness around that. And one of the ways that I play that through in my process, and to process it for myself as a human being, is to watch and see, how does material react to that extreme heat in the clay? It's not enough. What I'm doing is not enough, and it's not clear enough. That's why I want the writing to be there. But at this point, that is the point at which my fluency takes me to, is this kind of material dialogue and an embodied experience of what it means to be severed from my family's past by colonialism, but also be in a world that has so much hate and murder, and the history of colonialism, and the violence inherent in that is imprinted through millennia of clay production as well. So we can see that in ceramic history as well. And so I think that probably is a reason I chose to work in ceramics, is because these layered histories and these complex histories are there in a way that go beyond where I'm able to analyze at this point. But I want my muscles to get better and stronger in these other ways as well. So there's more of a balance for me, because I need more than just aesthetics. I need more than just embodiment. I need I need a specificity that I think will be more tied with language and actions that go beyond the studio as well.
That's beautiful. Thank you. I really appreciate you sharing that, because it's tough to talk about those things, and sometimes you're like, why do I have to keep talking about this? But I think it's part of the therapy and part of the history and the education that we're all trying to learn about. That's just the way it has to be for a while. We have to talk about it and right the wrongs.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think that. Yeah, I think that is something that I'm hungry for. I'm ready for, and it's I'm at a time in my life that I want that directness. That not. I just don't feel there's that much time for too much oblique stuff to happen. I think that's one reason I've gone to the Netherlands twice now, is to go directly and to be in conversation with people at the museums, holding the objects. There's open admission of the fact that many of those Indonesian objects were unfairly acquired, stolen, and the exhibition at the museum, at the Wereld Museum in Amsterdam right now, is open about images of enslaved people, and the Indonesian suffering that happened in there is present in the way that they're talking about that work. And while I was there this summer, over 1,000 objects were repatriated, were sent back to Indonesia. So a lot of the work for decolonizing museum spaces has made me, I'm just there at the museum at the same time, talking about objects that I'm interested in. I showed you some of the objects of those, some images of the objects. But yeah, there's so much happening at the same time that I want my muscles to kind of grow quickly, and to be ready for next steps. I don't think that skipping to healing is the answer either. I think that we often go from trauma to healing, but there's so much in between that needs to be processed for me and for my family. It's been only very recently that we've even talked about any of this kind of stuff within my family. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
Thank you for sharing. I mean, it's like a different type of activism, that needs to happen continuously. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you so much.
And Joe Shea says, such an amazing hour. Thank you for sharing with us. And I want to say, Linda, that you have so eloquently brought us into your work and given us a window into your life and experiences. And I so appreciate you coming and sharing with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much for welcoming me into your conversation.
And lots of luck on this wonderful year sabbatical.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much. Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you,
Mhm.
Linda.
Thanks.
Thank you.